Hey guys, what's happening? Aaron here. Well, moving right along with the 2017 review season. Up next, we have a game from pretty much my favorite video game series of all time, my beloved Castlevania. I'll be reviewing Castlevania Dracula X. Now, with this game, you have to kind of give it a little bit of leeway, because as I'll be explaining in the video, this game was not designed for the Super Nintendo. It's a port of a game that was released in Japan on the PC Engine CD, more or less. So other than that, sit back and enjoy, and thanks for watching my review of Castlevania Dracula X. Thanks always for watching, and take care. I consider myself a hardcore gamer, as I had been since around the age of about 6 years old, when the original NES came out. Thus, I've always kept up to date on when new games were coming out or new developments in the video game industry. I used to pore over every issue of Nintendo Power magazine growing up, or Electronic Gaming Monthly. I would scour the local library for back issues, go to the magazine racks to find new issues, and basically just try to absorb every bit of information I could about everything going on. What the hell does all this have to do with the forthcoming review? Because, basically, I found this game by accident. Completely accident. Castlevania Dracula X. Super Castlevania 4 had been one of my all-time favorites, and still is to this day. One Friday night, back in 1995, I happened to go into one of the local businesses that rented out games, looking for something to play for the weekend. Most of the selection was the usual, and then I spotted this box. What the fuck? What is this? Where the hell did it come from? Is it a joke? Is it a fake? Why did I not hear a thing about it? And that's how I first found Castlevania Dracula X. Just completely by surprise. I hadn't heard anything at all about it coming out, being developed, anything. Well, that'll be explained later. Let's jump right into what a lot of people consider the black sheep of the non-3D Castlevania games. Taking place in 1792, which, chronologically speaking, takes place in between Harmony of Dissonance and Symphony of the Night, Dracula X follows the adventures of one Richter Belmont, vampire slayer and heir to the legendary whip Vampire Killer. Dracula has kidnapped Richter's love interest, Annette, and her younger sister, Maria, and has fled back to Castlevania. Thus, the game is set in match. Before I go any further, let's clarify one thing. Castlevania Dracula X is a port of a game. It is not an original game in the Castlevania series. It's a port of Castlevania Rondo of Blood, which was released in Japan only on the PC Engine Turbo CD, otherwise known as the TurboGrafx CD here in America. There are many changes that Konami made for Dracula X, many changes that upset fans of the series, and many changes that didn't really make any sense, but I'll go into those later. Your quest begins in the small village just outside of Castlevania, and you journey towards Dracula at the top of his castle, which is a little throwback to the original game, I feel, because the layout is very similar to the first Castlevania. Unfortunately, this was the last release in the Castlevania series that featured the giant overworld map showing progression. So, the majority of things are the same, at least control-wise. You move around, whipping monsters, jumping over pits, and climbing stairways. Richter can also do a neat backflip, but I find it mostly useless unless you need to escape a dire situation. The usual fare. Sub-weapons like the dagger and cross return, and function similar to previous games. Although, you also have what's known as an item crash, which is basically like a sub-weapon super attack, and it's cool because it would go on to become one of Richter's trademarks. Think basically screen nuke. You battle your way across several stages, at the end of which, as is tradition, you fight a large boss to progress. Along the way, there are also branching paths you can take, which reveal alternate routes through levels and alter certain elements, like the ending you'll receive. Unfortunately, unlike Rondo, Dracula X doesn't have nearly as many alternate routes. Also, in the original game, once you rescued Maria, she became a playable character. Not so in the port. There's a few alternate changes as well, like certain levels have been redesigned. The final boss battle with Dracula is different, etc. Not game-breaking changes per se, but if you've played the Japanese original, as I have, you'll easily spot the differences. Graphics-wise, the game looks really good. Does it stand up to a CD-based game of the time? Of course not. We're comparing apples to oranges here, people. The Super Nintendo was still shackled to using cartridges, so obviously, some trimming and compressing of visual data had to take place in order to fit the game onto the SNES cartridge. For the most part, everything looks good. The animations for characters and enemies do seem to be a little smoother in Rondo, and I feel that the shading is less pronounced in Dracula X. Also, background details and other subtle things also appear smoother in the original game. This probably comes down to personal taste, as I've heard a lot of people prefer the presentation on the Super Nintendo compared to the original, so to each his own, I guess. On the sound end of things, they're pretty damn good as well. The soundtrack has some very catchy tunes, and the majority of them fit each level nicely. The soundtrack on the original PC Engine Turbo CD easily trumps this one. But again, it's comparing a CD to a cartridge. The fuck do you expect? The sound effects are also quite nice, but some things like when Richter takes damage sounds muffled. Or it's almost like they use the shortest possible sound clip for some things. Obviously, again, to most likely save on storage space. The original game also had some simple cutscenes that featured animations and voice acting, which again have been cut, but that really isn't a big negative. And at the same time, it's a little unfair to compare this game to its predecessor, Super Castlevania 4, in terms of presentation, because that game was made for the Super Nintendo. This wasn't. Lastly, the difficulty has been severely increased for the port, and I easily remember that aspect, even from playing it back in my teenage years. Usually, most Castlevania games have a fairly decent difficulty curve, whereas this one, it was almost like Konami saying, fuck you. Jumps are stretched to the absolute maximum, so much so that many times, even playing it nowadays, I completely feel like I'm going to miss the jump, only to literally land on my tippy toes. Bosses for the most part aren't that difficult, however, most of them were programmed really weird. In many of the boss fights, when you strike the boss, they fly away to the other side of the screen, and you have to go chasing after them instead of keeping the fight close quarters. Kind of a nitpick, I'll admit it, but oh well. Also worth mentioning is that the final fight with Dracula is completely changed to total bullshit in this game. Like, really? A fucking boss fight isn't hard enough, but you have to add fucking pits in there? Not only is this completely unfair, but it doesn't make any sense. Because the beginning of Symphony of the Night makes you replay this battle. And if you've never played the original, then it totally doesn't match up. Whereas in Rondo, the final Dracula battle is as how you see it in Symphony. Don't ask me why, I don't work for Konami. Overall, Castlevania Dracula X is a decent game. It really doesn't stand up to any of its brethren, released before or after it. It doesn't have the nostalgia or game design of the entries that came before it, and it doesn't have the visual flair or innovation for those that came after it. It's just stuck in the middle, I guess? Again, being that this is a port and wasn't designed for the platform most gamers played it on, you can't really hold a lot of things against it. It is what it is. I've thought about reviewing the original Castlevania Rondo of Blood since it's available on the Wii's Virtual Console, but time will tell. It's also included on the Dracula X Chronicles for PSP. Would I include it in my top 5 Castlevania games of all time? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Is it a fun game to throw in and play through as a reminder of good 90s 2D side-scrolling adventures? Sure, why the hell not? Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, go check it out.